passing the House and going to the Senate and going through the ratification process, because it will open doors for so many businesses in my electorate, let alone across the whole country. And I commend the bill to the House.
I thank the member. The question is this bill be now read a second time. We'll call the member for Kennedy.
Yeah, Mr Acting Speaker, I feel sorry for the members of the government. I really do. They get a brief. They've got to get up and tell us how wonderful a free trade deal is and how it's going to save the world. I stood in this place and saw the then Prime Minister stand up and lead the clapping for Andrew Robb on the free trade deal with China. And I thought, well, maybe I know nothing about politics, but if this is getting you votes, I am a Martian astronaut. Well, 4 weeks later, he was thrown out a window. I mean, the people of Australia, you think you're deceiving them. Well, you're not. You know, when they hear free trade deal, they hate you. Right? You understand that because I might not be an expert in a number of fields, but after 41 years of straight wins in pretty hostile territory, I can tell you, maybe I know a little tiny bit about politics. Sat at the feet of great master Bjelke Petersen, Mr Acting Speaker. Maybe I know a little bit about politics. So if you're not interested in the government of your country, you're not interested in helping your country, maybe you might just think about survival for yourself, Mr Acting Speaker. So I feel sorry for the LNP. Now, the House has to understand that they somehow think that Australia's this big, huge country and it can produce magnificent amount of agricultural production. Well, it most certainly can produce a lot more than it's producing. But, Mr Acting Speaker, it's not a big, huge country, agriculture country at all. 53% of Australia is designated as desert. 23% is designated as Indigenous lands. Since the governments of Australia won't give them title deed, they're sterilised. So that's 76% gone. And there's 7% national parks. So you take out that 83%, there ain't a lot left, Mr Acting Speaker. Now, the concept that you need huge areas of land will produce huge areas of food. Sorry, wrong. I mean, there's a few thousand hectares, maybe 30,000 hectares of land is producing about a quarter of Australia's beef production. They're called lot feeders. I mean, basically, cattle don't wander around chewing grass. That's not the way beef is produced anymore in America or in Europe or in Australia. They're done in lot feeders, Mr Acting Speaker. So you have a different concept altogether where you don't need huge areas of land. It is your competitive advantage in that lot feeder is where the action comes. Your competitive advantage in that area, Mr Acting Speaker. Now, somehow they think, oh, there's millions of people in Southeast Asia and we're going to be able to sell all this food to them. Oh, Mr Acting Speaker, I'd refer you to the statistics. In actual fact, there's a pretty good chance that we'll be importing food from these countries. And let me be very specific, Mr Acting Speaker. When I stood up in this place 15 years ago and said this market fundamentalism, this free market rubbish will destroy your country, I said that Australia could become a net importer of food. Well, every 10 years the imports increase at 103% and the exports increase at 21%. So, I mean, you don't have to be Albert Einstein to figure out that the graphs will soon cross. Mr Acting Speaker, you must understand that to produce protein now, in fact, if every Chinese city had 2 20-storey buildings with tanks on each storey, then they could produce all of the protein requirements for China. They don't have to buy any of our beef. They don't have to buy any of our seafood product. In fact, if you look at a graph of the increase in seafood production in China, if you extrapolated that graph on for about 30 or 40 years, Mr Acting Speaker, in theory, all of the world's protein would be coming out of the prawn and fish farms in China. But, Mr Acting Speaker, I'm fascinated by how this is going to help Australia. And the last speaker touted the beef industry. I don't know if he knows anything about it. I'd rather doubt that he doesn't, Mr Acting Speaker. But he touted the beef industry. Well, let us have a look at what this free trade deal does for the beef industry. We sell our beef at the present moment at $2 a kilogram. If you look at the average price, it's a lot less than that. But I'll take $2 a kilogram. So its 10% tariff has been abolished. So that's 20 cents. 20 cent advantage we get. Now, the beef sells over there for $30 a kilogram, $32 a kilogram. As the figure's been given to me, Mr Acting Speaker, $32 a kilogram. But now, the Australians are going to have a terrific advantage at 20 cents. So it's $31.80 now. Oh, jeez, that'll lead to a huge increase in the benefits for the beef producers of Australia. Mr Acting Speaker, a difference between $32 and $31.80. And they are touting this. This Member of Parliament sitting beside me here seriously touted that as it's going to help the beef industry. I mean, why doesn't he do his homework? Why does he just take the drivel that comes from the front bench? And the drivel that comes from the front bench is dictated by the giant corporations that bankroll the mainstream parties. Mr Acting Speaker, having dealt with the LNP, no, I think we'll move on now to the ALP. And if there is a day in which Red Ted Theodore will turn in his grave and the founders of the Labor movement would spit upon the people that sit in this House and call themselves Labor members, Mr Acting Speaker, when I walk out of this place, there is a magnificent portrait of a bloke called Charlie McDonald. Charlie McDonald was the first member for Kennedy, Mr Acting Speaker. And every time I go, I salute Charlie. Right? Charlie's 6 of his first 7 speeches in this place were railing against the importation of foreign labour. Well, this document, Mr Acting Speaker, opens the door to it. So this man went out and helped form the Labor Party, the Labor movement of Australia. Because when they had fought and literally died, there were 3 shearers shot dead at the strike where Waltzing Matilda was written a couple of months later, literally died, Mr Acting Speaker. The entire executive of the AWU were jailed for 3 years with hard labour for having a strike, Mr Acting Speaker. These men went hungry, their families went hungry. And what happened when they got arbitration was the miners said, we're bringing the coolies in from China. You take that, Buster Brown, take that. And the cane plantations, they said, we're bringing the cane cutters in, we're bringing the Kanaks in. So take that, Buster Brown, take that. So the first member for Kennedy stood up in this place and courageously fought to create the Labor Party. And the people that sit here on $200,000, $300,000 a year, enjoying the benefits from the creation of that Labor movement, they sit here and betray every principle that was put forward by those people. Charlie McDonald would turn in his grave, Mr Acting Speaker. But I am proud to say that the people at Kennedy are still represented by people that are not sellouts. They're not under the control of the big plantation owners or the big mining companies. No, we're under the control of the people of our area. That's who we're under the control of, Mr Acting Speaker, and proud to say it, because this opens the door. This opens the door that the Charlie McDonald died for. And the ALP today sold them out. Lock, stock and barrel. There is not a trade unionist in Australia that's not looking at the ground and being ashamed of his association with the Labor movement, Mr Acting Speaker. Now let me become very, very specific, Mr Acting Speaker, because I am fascinated. I'm just a poor, humble, simple Cloncurry boy. Now, clearly, these wunderkind over here and over here have decided to have free markets. And the honourable member there's making faces. He thinks it's funny. Now, I'll tell you how funny it is, my friend. I'll tell you how funny it is. You have to buy everything from overseas. The last white goods factory, which is at Orange, closes this year. So you have to buy all your white goods from overseas. About 40% of the steel that is in your house, the roofing iron, the reinforcing steel for your floor, comes from overseas. About 40% of your cement comes from overseas, Mr Acting Speaker. But all your white goods, all your motor cars next year will come from overseas. The motor cars in your garage, Mr Acting Speaker. The clothes that you wear all come from overseas, Mr Acting Speaker. The footwear that you wear will all come from overseas, Mr Acting Speaker. So, I mean, where are we going to get the money to buy all these things? The petrol you put in your car, it all comes from overseas. So everything that we buy comes from overseas. Let me turn to food, Mr Acting Speaker. Let me turn to food. This country, and people laughed at me, the honourable member there, Minister for something or other, Mr Brough, he laughed at me. Right? Well, people laughed at me ever since I come in this place and started talking about this. And I want it on record that he laughed at me. Because the history books, they pass judgment upon you. The history books pass judgment upon you, Mr Acting Speaker. And they will say, who are the people that destroyed this country? We've got to buy everything from overseas, Mr Acting Speaker. Where are we going to get the money to buy all our petrol, to buy all our motor cars, to buy everything that's in our house, to buy the clothes on our back? Where are we going to get the money to buy all these things from? And let me turn to food for one moment, because people laugh at me about this. Well, this country now is a net importer of pork. It is a net importer of seafood. It is a net importer of fruit and vegetables. And it's only a matter of time, as I said to you, 100%, 103% every 10 years, the last time I looked, and 21% increase in exports over every 10 years. So, I mean, eventually, inevitably as the sun rises, we will become a net importer of food. In fact, if you take out, you can't eat live cattle and you can't eat unprocessed grain, but if you take those two commodities out, we're getting pretty close to being a net importer of food now, Mr Acting Speaker. So people have laughed at me. Already, the people of Australia are passing judgment upon them as we talk, Mr Acting Speaker. So where are we going to get this money from? Really, we have only two things now that we export, and everyone knows that: iron ore and coal. And I'm not here to denigrate those industries. In fact, I pray every night of my life to the good Lord, Mr Acting Speaker, that it does not come to pass, a continuation of what we're suffering in the thermal coal industry. But I wouldn't like to be backing myself in, Mr Acting Speaker, and I'm not going to go into the problems in the thermal coal industry. Mr Acting Speaker, what you got is what you got in iron ore. So the country depends, they've got to buy everything from overseas, and all they get to buy it with is iron ore and coal. A little bit of gold, but of course aluminium is doomed. Aluminium is electricity. It came to Australia when we had the cheapest electricity in the world in Queensland. Australia now has the second highest electricity charges in the world. So it'll be buy by aluminium. It'll be buy by all mineral processing, because it all depends upon, and I'm sick and tired in this place of hearing, oh, it's high wages that are killing us. Well, I'll tell you, wages look pretty bloody small when you compare it with the cost of mineral processing, which is the cost of electricity, Mr Acting Speaker. And the incompetence of the people in this place and the state governments have taken electricity charges up 400% in 10 years. That's what your free markets and your privatisation have done. 400% increase in electricity charges in 10 years. The 10 years before that in Queensland, Mr Acting Speaker, there was no increase at all. The 10 years before privatisation and a deregulation of pricing mechanism, we had no movement in price at all, Mr Acting Speaker. My case rests. But it dooms aluminium and it dooms mineral processing. So you're left with iron ore and coal, Mr Acting Speaker. And I can tell you that the income from iron ore and coal, maybe 150,000 million, whatever it is not enough to meet our exports, our imports. Nowhere near enough. So you live in a country that has gone broke at 100 miles an hour. You cannot buy everything from overseas when you've got nothing to sell overseas, Mr Acting Speaker. When you've got nothing to sell overseas. So I conclude on that note, Mr Acting Speaker. The people of this place, with their market fundamentalism, their fanaticism, have imposed upon Australia a regime that no other country on earth has to suffer under. Our farmers, every other farmer on earth gets 40% of his income from the government. Our poor farmers get 6%.
The member.
Speaker. And I conclude on that note. So much for your free trade.
The question is this bill be now read a second time. I give the call to the member for Forrest.